Okay, really quick, I'm going to review the criteria that I use in selecting the wood that goes into my project, specifically reclaimed wood. And it falls into two categories: the character of the wood and the structure of the wood. First off, for the character, the issue is I'm trying to find wood that has some of the trademarks of reclaimed wood. And that's either coming in the type of saw blade marks that it has, which kind of falls into two categories: either they're circular saw blade marks or there were bandsaw saw blade marks. You also have boards that were made from guys with axes, like hand hewn. Those are beautiful as well. And then some guys have got chainsaw marks in them, which usually are kind of a dog's breakfast and don't really show up that well. But I mostly focus on the circular saw marks and the bandsaw saw marks. And the more you do it, the better you kind of get at looking at it. But I always carry with me a sander to kind of take a look. So you can see this board here. It's dirty, it's messy, and if you look at it in the right light, you can already start to see the ridges that are made by the circular saw that it went through. But I'll take my sander and give it a quick sand and just try and have those show up a little bit. So now you can see on that board that there was a circular saw that cut these boards, and as that board was going through the sawmill or the PTO on the tractor or whatever they were using, some of the saw blades might have been bent a little bit, or the blade itself might have been wobbling, and that's what's creating some of those divots and those grooves in the wood. And that's one of the like hallmark characteristics of reclaimed wood. If you look at another board that doesn't have much paint on it, like this one, you can also kind of see, if you've got the right light, you can see some of those ridges, and I'll give that a quick look. So what we're doing is taking down the high areas and leaving the low areas. And because the saw blade was making grooves in the wood, you can see that on each one of these saw blades, it's made that little mark. So that's my very first thing. Oh, here's a quick example. Here's one that was made by bandsaws. So I'm not sanding it all the way. I'm just getting an idea of what the wood's going to look like. So here you can see the straight bandsaw saw blade marks that were made when this wood was made. So that's one thing I'm really quickly scanning for. If you've got a piece of wood that was perfectly planed down and went through some mill that did it all perfect, it already doesn't have any saw blade marks on it, so you're really only relying on if there's a nail hole or a check or a crack or some weathering or something like that. So first thing I'm looking for is saw blade marks. The second thing for me is the structure of the wood. So either is it stable enough, like when I cut through the end of it, let me see if I got one here. So when I cut through the end of a board, is it all rotten and falling it apart? Or is there still lots of good solid wood that I can build my furniture out of? You can see in most cases, like once you've cut the end off, the part that's the character, right? The weathering part is so thin. There's not a whole lot left of it. And it used to have really good wood left over. So as long as you don't have wood that has cracks all the way through, like on that side, you can see there's a crack that goes all the way through. It only travels back about 2 inches. So there are ways of stabilizing that. And then on this one, you can see a few cracks starting to come into the top, but they aren't going all the way through. So that's a good piece of wood. We've got, for most of the barns and the fences and the reclaimed wood that we're using, it was made of generally some type of dimensional wood and then some 1x material. So if you're building solid wood tables, you want to lean more towards the 2x material. If you're going to use the method that I use for some of my tables, where I use a plywood core, you can find some thinner wood and use that, rely on the strength of the plywood and the character of the barnwood. Now when it comes to the structure of the wood, there's a few things I'm looking for. One, obviously you want to look at how straight it is. You could have a board like this that's not really straight, it's twisted. So if I'll show you this here. If I set it down on the table and I push one corner, you can see there's quite a bit of travel between the two. And that means when I go to try and square this board up, I've got quite a bit of milling to do. And the risk is, like I can get this to be some dimension of flat board, but the risk is by the time I've gone through that whole exercise, I might have had to take off the vast majority of what makes reclaimed wood. And in that case, I might as well just use a new piece of wood. So when I look at a piece of wood like this, I'm trying to find where inside of this twist can I get a solid piece to work with. So I might come down and look and see that somewhere inside of here, there's a solid piece of wood that I can use. But if I've taken off all the barnwood, then I'm just back to like a 2x4 from Home Depot, or a 2x6 from Home Depot. So this is an extreme example how much I would take off, but you get, like, that's what my eye is looking for, is how can I get a straight 90-degree flat, you know, and relatively flat top and still expose some of the character. So really twisted boards are out already. If they're just twisted a bit, then I can work with that. The second thing that I'm going to look for is if the board is bent, like either bent up and down or bent side to side. It can be bent side to, like, from the side to the side, but I've got to find a piece of wood inside that bend. So I'm going to cut off the two sides of it and end up taking two wings off this side and kind of a half moon off this side. And if you can find a nice board, maybe you've got a 2x10 to work with, and you might end up with a 2x8 or a 2x6, but if it's got a lot of good character, then that's fine. I don't mind working with that type of wood. I am going to also look at wood like this, where it was just panels that were made for fences, and they never squared it up. All they did was just cut the wood and make a panel to sit it up. Now obviously that's a horrible edge to try and join, but you can see inside of here, there's a pretty good board to work with some nice character. So I can square off the two sides, and I've actually got a pretty flat board to work with. And the last thing is how cupped the board is. And in one of the last videos I did, you can see how I took cupped boards, flattened out the bottom, and then used them. I don't mind a little bit of cupping. So on this board, you can see that this wing here, or this side and that side, are both high. And so I can take the bottom of this and I can square that right up. I can create two 90s, and then I'm going to end up taking off the top two wings, and I'm going to leave that centerpiece that has all the character in the wood. I'll fill that with filler afterwards, expose all the saw blade marks, and what ends up happening is you have some clean plain wood, and then the presence of some of the saw blade marks. So that's kind of the tricks. You know, that's really what you're looking for. If you've got 2x material that's structurally sound, you can use that for your furniture. If it's not quite sound, then you can mill it down like I do to where it's a 1/4 inch thick, and use the strength of plywood, use the beauty of the barnwood and the strength of the plywood to get your stuff. Oh, and one thing I should mention as well, I also look at the moisture content. I prefer to use, and it's a good rule to use, wood that's below 10%, you know, 7, 8, 9%, somewhere in there. So there's plenty of guys that make moisture meters. You pop them in and you just see where your wood's at. If it's really wet, you need to dry that stuff out or get some dry wood. That's it. Those are the tips. That's how I use the wood.